I brought my 9-year-old daughter to visit Mom, but when I spotted my husband's SUV parked at her gate, my stomach twisted. Something wasn't right. Silently, I crept to the window. What I heard inside shattered my world. Jeffrey's phone screen glowed with a message that made my blood freeze. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Laura suspects nothing." The sender? I stood there in our kitchen at 11:30 on a Tuesday night, holding my husband's forgotten phone while he slept upstairs. The message had just appeared, lighting up the darkness around me. My hands trembled as I scrolled up through their conversation thread. Weeks of messages. Months actually. Planning meetings. Sharing inside jokes. Discussing me like I was some obstacle to navigate around. Just 3 hours earlier I'd been folding Jennifer's school clothes, humming along to the radio, completely oblivious to the fact that my entire life was built on lies. Jeffrey had kissed my forehead before heading to bed, the same gentle kiss he'd given me every night for 12 years. "Sleep well, sweetheart," he'd whispered. Those words now felt poisonous. Before we continue, I want to thank you for joining me in sharing these stories of strength and resilience. If you believe women deserve to reclaim their power from betrayal, please consider subscribing. It's free and helps us reach more women who need to hear this. Now let's see how this unfolds. I scrolled further back through their messages. February 14th. Valentine's Day. While I'd been making Jeffrey's favorite dinner, he'd been texting my mother about meeting her at the Riverside Hotel. The same day I'd found rose petals scattered on our bedroom floor and thought he'd been planning a romantic surprise for me. He had been planning a surprise, just not for the woman he'd married. My legs gave out and I sank onto one of our kitchen stools. The same stools Jeffrey and I had picked out together at the furniture store last Christmas. Jennifer had spun around on this exact seat while we debated between oak and cherry wood. "Get the pretty brown ones, Mama," she'd said, her gap-toothed grin melting my heart. Now even this innocent memory felt tainted. The phone buzzed again. Another message from Mom. "Jeffrey, did you remember to transfer the money? Laura checked the account yesterday." "Money? What money?" I frantically opened his banking app, grateful that he'd never changed the password from Jennifer's birthday. What I found there made my stomach drop. Regular transfers of $500 to an account I didn't recognize. Going back 6 months. The same time frame when Mom had suddenly started being able to afford those expensive dinners at fancy restaurants she'd been bragging about. I thought back to all the times she'd called recently, always asking to speak with Jeffrey specifically. "Is Jeffrey home? I need to ask him about something." She'd claimed it was about fixing her garbage disposal, or understanding her new tablet, or getting advice about refinancing her house. Innocent requests from a mother-in-law who'd never shown much interest in household repairs or technology before. Now it all made sense. The way she'd started dressing differently when she knew Jeffrey would be around. How she'd begun wearing perfume to family dinners. The way she'd laughed just a little too loudly at his jokes, touching his arm when she thought I wasn't watching. I'd actually felt proud that my mother and husband got along so well. What kind of fool was I? The worst part was remembering how I'd defended their friendship to myself. When my sister Katie had mentioned that Mom seemed awfully interested in Jeffrey's work schedule, I'd brushed off her concerns. "She's just being friendly," I'd said. "It's nice that they have a good relationship." Katie had given me a look I couldn't read at the time. Now I wondered if she'd suspected something even then. I scrolled through more messages, each one feeling like a physical blow. They discussed my work schedule, planning their meetings around my shifts at the dental office. They talked about Jennifer's school pickup times, making sure their afternoon encounters wouldn't interfere with family obligations. They even joked about my cooking, sharing some private amusement about the lasagna I'd proudly served at Sunday dinner just last week. But it was the financial messages that truly shattered me. They weren't just having an affair. They were stealing from me. The money Jeffrey had been transferring was from Dad's life insurance policy, the one that was supposed to secure Jennifer's college fund. "Mom had convinced me to put Jeffrey's name on the account for convenience," she'd said. "In case something happens to you, dear. We want to make sure Jennifer's future is protected." I trusted her completely. After Dad died 2 years ago, Mom had seemed so lost, so fragile. I'd wanted to help her feel involved in financial decisions, thinking it would give her a sense of purpose. Instead, she'd been planning this betrayal with my husband, using my grief and trust against me. The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the silence. 12:15 now. In just a few hours I'd need to wake up, make breakfast, get Jennifer ready for school and pretend everything was normal. How was I supposed to look at Jeffrey over morning coffee knowing what I now knew? How could I hug my daughter goodbye when her father was actively destroying our family? I heard footsteps upstairs. Jeffrey getting up for his usual midnight snack. In 30 seconds he'd walk down those stairs expecting to find his devoted wife asleep, his phone safely where he'd left it, his secrets intact. Instead he'd find me sitting here in the dark, holding evidence of his betrayal. But something strange happened as I heard his footsteps approaching the staircase. Instead of panic or despair I felt something else entirely. Clarity. For months I'd been questioning myself, wondering why I felt so disconnected from my own life. Why Jeffrey seemed distant. Why Mom's behavior felt off. I'd blamed myself thinking I was being paranoid or needy. Now I knew the truth. And with that truth came power. I quickly placed Jeffrey's phone back exactly where he'd left it and slipped quietly up the back stairs to our bedroom. He passed me in the hallway, barely glancing my way as he headed toward the kitchen. Just another night in our perfectly normal marriage. As I lay in bed listening to him rummage through the refrigerator below, I wasn't the same woman who'd fallen asleep a few hours earlier. That woman had been living in an illusion. This woman knew exactly what she was dealing with. And this woman was going to do something about it. The next morning I made Jeffrey his usual coffee and scrambled eggs, watching him scroll through his phone at the breakfast table. He had no idea I'd seen every message. No clue that I'd memorized his banking passwords. He just sat there, buttering his toast, completely oblivious to the fact that his wife had transformed overnight into someone he'd never met before. "Thanks, honey," he said, not even looking up when I placed his plate in front of him. The casual dismissal in his voice was almost laughable now. This man who'd been stealing from our daughter's future and sleeping with my mother couldn't even be bothered to make eye contact with me. I smiled and kissed his forehead, the same gesture he'd given me the night before. "Have a good day at work, sweetheart." The words tasted bitter, but my voice remained perfectly sweet. I decided during those sleepless hours that if Jeffrey could play a role, so could I. The difference was I was going to be much better at it. After he left, I dropped Jennifer off at school and drove straight to the electronics store. I needed recording equipment, something small and undetectable. The young clerk showed me tiny voice recorders that could stick under tables and wireless cameras disguised as everyday objects. I bought 3 different recording devices and a small digital camera with a zoom lens. "Planning some home security?" the clerk asked cheerfully as he rang up my purchases. "Something like that," I replied. I was securing my home all right, just not in the way he imagined. Back at the house, I spent the afternoon strategically placing the recording devices. One went under the coffee table in the living room where Jeffrey always sat to make his evening calls. Another went in the kitchen, taped under the cabinet where Mom liked to lean when she visited. The third one went in Jeffrey's home office, stuck beneath his desk drawer. The camera was trickier. I needed somewhere it could capture Jeffrey's computer screen when he worked from home on Fridays. After some experimentation, I positioned it inside a decorative plant on the bookshelf behind his desk. From that angle, it could record everything he typed and every video call he made. That evening, Jeffrey came home with flowers. Grocery store daisies, not even my favorites, but he presented them like they were roses from Paris. "Just because I love you," he said, wrapping his arms around me from behind while I arranged them in a vase. I leaned into his embrace, letting him think his guilt-driven gesture had worked. "They're beautiful. What's the occasion? Can't a man buy flowers for his wife without an occasion?" He spun me around to face him, studying my expression. For a moment I wondered if he suspected something. But then he smiled, that same charming smile that had won me over 13 years ago, and I realized he was just fishing for reassurance that I still adored him. "Of course he can," I said, standing on my tiptoes to kiss him. "I'm lucky to have such a thoughtful husband." The irony wasn't lost on me. Here he was, buying me flowers with money he'd stolen from our daughter's college fund, probably trying to ease his conscience about his afternoon plans with my mother. During dinner, Jennifer chattered about her school day while Jeffrey and I played the role of the perfect parents. But I noticed things I'd missed before. How Jeffrey checked his phone every few minutes. How he kept glancing at the clock on the wall. How he seemed eager for the evening to end. "Daddy, can you help me with my math homework?" Jennifer asked as I cleared the dishes. "Not tonight, sweetheart. Daddy has some work calls to make," Jeffrey said, already standing up from the table. Maybe tomorrow? Jennifer's face fell slightly, but she nodded. Hey, Mommy can help me. I watched Jeffrey disappear into his office and close the door. Within minutes, I heard his muffled voice through the walls. I helped Jennifer with her homework while mentally calculating how long I should wait before checking if my recording devices were working. Around 9 o'clock, after Jennifer was in bed, I heard Jeffrey's office door open. He emerged looking slightly flustered, running his hand through his hair the way he did when he was nervous. Everything okay? I asked from the couch where I was pretending to read a magazine. Just work stuff. You know how it is. He sat down beside me, but his leg bounced restlessly. Hey, I might need to run some errands tomorrow after work. Might be late for dinner. There was tomorrow's alibi, served up on a silver platter. No problem. Jennifer and I can make it a girls' night. Maybe order pizza and watch a movie. He relaxed visibly. You're the best. I don't know what I'd do without you. The sincerity in his voice was almost convincing. If I didn't know better, I might have believed he actually meant it. Instead, I just smiled and squeezed his hand. I love you too. That night, while Jeffrey slept beside me, I retrieved the recording device from his office. I plugged it into my laptop with headphones and listened to his entire conversation with Mom. They'd planned to meet at a new restaurant across town, discussing how to be more careful about their text messages. Mom had suggested they start using a messaging app that deleted conversations automatically. Laura's been asking more questions about the bank account, Jeffrey had said. I think we need to slow down with the transfers. Don't panic, Mom had replied. She trusts us completely. He always has. We just need to be smarter about timing. They talked about me like I was a problem to be managed, not a person they were betraying. Mom even laughed about how naive I was, how I'd probably never figure out what was happening right under my nose. I saved the recording to 3 different locations and made copies on 2 flash drives. This was just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, I collected hours of evidence. Phone calls, text messages, bank transfers, even photos I took of them together when they thought they were being discreet. The hardest part wasn't gathering the evidence. It was pretending nothing had changed when Jennifer asked her innocent questions. Why does Grandma call Daddy so much? She wondered one afternoon. She never used to call him before. I knelt down to her level, smoothing her hair back from her face. Sometimes grown-ups have complicated friendships, sweetheart. But you don't need to worry about that. Your job is just to be 9 years old and be happy. She seemed satisfied with that answer, but I saw the confusion in her eyes. Children sense tension even when they can't understand it. I was determined to protect her from the ugly truth for as long as possible. By the end of the month, I had enough evidence to destroy both Jeffrey and Mom completely. Bank records showing systematic theft. Recordings of them mocking me and planning their deception. Photos of them together in places they'd lied about visiting. I'd built an airtight case, documented everything they'd done wrong. Now came the hard part. Deciding exactly how to use it. I chose a Thursday evening for the confrontation. Jennifer was at her best friend's house for a sleepover, and Jeffrey had just returned from what he told me was a client dinner. I knew better. The restaurant receipt I'd found in his jacket pocket was for 2 meals at the same place where he'd been meeting Mom. I set up my laptop on the coffee table, all my evidence organized into neat folders. Bank statements, screenshots, audio recordings, photographs. Everything laid out like pieces of a puzzle that finally revealed the complete picture of their betrayal. Jeffrey walked into the living room, loosening his tie. Hey babe. How was your evening? Where's Jennifer? Sleepover at Madison's house, I said calmly, gesturing to the chair across from me. We need to talk. Something in my tone made him freeze. His eyes swept over the laptop, the papers spread across the table, my unnaturally composed expression. What's all this? Sit down, Jeffrey. He remained standing, his face already shifting into defensive mode. Laura, what's going on? You're scaring me. I clicked play on the first audio file. His voice filled the room, crystal clear from last Tuesday's phone call. She has no idea. Laura's always been too trusting. It's almost too easy. The color drained from his face completely. He sank into the chair like his legs had given out. This is from your conversation with my mother on Tuesday, I said, my voice steady as steel. Would you like to hear the one from Friday? Or maybe you'd prefer to see the bank records showing the $15,000 you've stolen from Jennifer's college fund. Jeffrey's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. I'd never seen him speechless before. The man who could talk his way out of any situation, who charmed clients and convinced investors, sat there looking like a cornered animal. Laura, I can explain. Explain this. I turned the laptop screen toward him, showing a photo I'd taken through the restaurant window. Him and Mom sharing dessert, her hand covering his across the table. Or maybe you'd like to explain this? I clicked to the next image. Mom getting into his car in the parking lot of the shopping center where she'd claimed to be buying groceries. His face cycled through shock, denial, and finally resignation. How long have you known? Long enough to document everything. Long enough to make copies. Long enough to decide exactly what I'm going to do about it. That's when he tried to recover, reaching for the charm that had worked on me for so many years. Laura, sweetheart, this isn't what it looks like. Your mother and I, we were trying to help you. The money. Stop. I held up my hand. Just stop talking. I have recordings of you two laughing about how gullible I am. I have evidence of you planning your meetings around my work schedule. I know about the hotel rooms, Jeffrey. I know about the joint account you opened with her using Dad's insurance money. The joint account had been my most devastating discovery. They'd been treating Dad's death benefit like their personal vacation fund, using money meant to secure our family's future to finance their affair. Mom had even used some of it to buy new clothes for their dates. Jeffrey tried a different approach. The marriage has been difficult lately. You've been distant, working so much. Your mother was just... My mother was just what? Being supportive? Is that what you call sleeping with your daughter's husband and stealing from your granddaughter's future? Before he could answer, my phone rang. Mom's name appeared on the screen. Perfect timing. Answer it, I told Jeffrey. Go ahead. Tell her you've been caught. He stared at the phone, paralyzed. I answered it myself, putting it on speaker. Laura dear, is Jeffrey there? I need to ask him about tomorrow's meeting with the financial advisor. The lie rolled off her tongue so easily. There was no financial advisor. There never had been. He's right here, Mom. In fact, we were just discussing all those meetings you two have been having. The silence on the other end stretched for long seconds. Then, in a voice I barely recognized, Laura? What do you mean? I mean, I know everything. About the affair. About the money. About the lies you've both been telling me for months. I heard her sharp intake of breath. Sweetheart, I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding. The only misunderstanding was mine, thinking I could trust either of you. I ended the call and looked back at Jeffrey. She'll be here within 10 minutes. She can't resist trying to control the situation. Sure enough, 7 minutes later, Mom's car pulled into our driveway. She burst through the front door without knocking, something she'd never done before. Her hair was disheveled, her makeup smeared, panic written across her face. Laura, honey, whatever Jeffrey told you. Jeffrey didn't tell me anything. I found out on my own. I gestured to the evidence spread across the table. Everything's right here. Mom's eyes darted between Jeffrey and the laptop screen, calculating damage, searching for an escape route. When she realized there wasn't one, she tried what she'd always used on me: maternal manipulation. Sweetheart, you have to understand. Jeffrey came to me for advice about your marriage. He was so worried about you, about how withdrawn you'd become. I was just trying to help both of you work through your problems. The audacity of it almost made me laugh. By sleeping with him? By stealing Dad's insurance money? That was your idea of marriage counseling. That money was mine. Your father left it to me. Dad left it for Jennifer's education. You convinced me to add Jeffrey's name to make it easier to manage. You used my grief and my trust to set up this whole scheme. Jeffrey finally found his voice. Laura, please. We never meant for it to go this far. It just happened. Nothing just happened. The composure I'd maintained for weeks finally cracked. You planned this. Both of you. You discussed my work schedule to plan your meetings. You opened secret accounts. You stole from our daughter. This wasn't some accident or moment of weakness. This was calculated betrayal. Mom tried to approach me, reaching out like she had when I was a child and needed comfort. Laura, I'm still your mother. I love you. Don't. I stepped back from her outstretched hand. A mother who loved me wouldn't destroy my marriage. A mother who loved me wouldn't steal from her granddaughter. You're not my mother anymore. You're just a stranger who happens to share my DNA. The words hit her harder than I'd expected. She actually staggered backward, her face crumpling. For a moment I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. I want both of you out of my house. Tonight. Jeffrey, you can collect your things tomorrow when I'm at work. Mom, you're no longer welcome here. Ever. Laura, we can work this out, Jeffrey pleaded. Think about Jennifer. Think about our family. I am thinking about Jennifer. I'm thinking about protecting her from people who would steal her future and lie to her face. I'm thinking about showing her what it looks like when someone has enough self-respect to refuse to be treated this way. I walked to the front door and held it open. Get out. Both of you. They left together, which seemed fitting. As I watched their cars disappear down our street, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Relief. I spent the entire night after they left sitting in my living room, staring at the space where Jeffrey's leather recliner used to be. He'd taken it when he moved out, along with his golf clubs and the vintage watch collection he'd inherited from his grandfather. The room looked bigger somehow, emptier but also cleaner. Like I'd finally swept out cobwebs I hadn't realized were there. At 6 in the morning, my phone buzzed with a text from Madison's mom asking if she should bring Jennifer home or if I wanted to pick her up. I chose to pick her up myself. I needed the drive to clear my head, to figure out how to explain to my 9-year-old daughter that her life was about to change completely. Jennifer bounced into the car with her overnight bag, chattering about the movie they'd watched and the pancakes they'd made for breakfast. Her happiness was infectious, and for a moment I let myself forget about everything that had happened in the last 12 hours. "Where's Daddy's car?" she asked as we pulled into our driveway. "Daddy's staying somewhere else for a while," I said carefully. "We need to have a talk." Her face changed instantly, the carefree joy replaced by concern. "Are you and Daddy getting divorced?" The question caught me off guard. I'd planned to ease into the conversation, but Jennifer had always been perceptive beyond her years. "Yes, sweetheart. We are." She was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. "Is it because of Grandma?" My heart stopped. "What do you mean?" I heard her on the phone with Daddy sometimes. She sounded different when she talked to him. Like how Madison's mom talks to her boyfriend. Jennifer looked up at me with those wise eyes that reminded me so much of my father. I don't really understand it, but I knew something was wrong. I pulled her into my arms right there in the driveway, holding her tight while I tried to find the right words. How do you explain betrayal to a child without destroying her faith in the people who are supposed to love her? Sometimes grown-ups make choices that hurt the people they love, I said finally. Daddy and Grandma made some choices that hurt our family. But none of this is your fault, and both of them still love you very much. "Do you still love me?" she asked in a small voice. "More than anything in the entire world," I whispered into her hair. "You and I are going to be just fine. Better than fine." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of practical decisions. I hired Sarah Mitchell, the toughest divorce attorney in town, who took one look at my evidence and smiled like a shark who'd just spotted blood in the water. She assured me that Jeffrey's theft of Jennifer's education fund, combined with the adultery documentation, would result in a settlement heavily weighted in my favor. Meanwhile, I had to figure out where we were going to live. The house held too many memories, and I couldn't afford the mortgage on my dental hygienist salary alone. I found a 2-bedroom apartment in a complex near Jennifer's school, with a small balcony overlooking a playground. It wasn't much, but it felt like possibility. Moving day was harder than I'd expected. Jennifer helped me pack her room, carefully wrapping her ceramic horse collection in tissue paper. When we got to a framed photo of her with Jeffrey at last year's father-daughter dance, she stared at it for a long time. "Can I keep this?" she asked. "Of course. He's still your daddy even if we're not married anymore." She tucked the photo into her memory box, along with the friendship bracelet her best friend had made her and a pressed flower from her grandfather's funeral. Watching her curate what mattered most broke my heart and filled me with pride at the same time. Our first night in the apartment, we ordered Chinese takeout and ate it sitting on boxes while we watched cartoons on my laptop. Jennifer fell asleep curled up next to me on the air mattress we'd blown up in the living room, and I realized this was the most peaceful I'd felt in months. The hardest part wasn't the logistics of divorce or the financial stress. It was the evenings when Jennifer asked why Grandma never called anymore. I'd blocked Mom's number after she'd left 17 voicemails in 2 days, each one cycling through anger, tears, and manipulation. But Jennifer didn't understand why her grandmother had suddenly vanished from her life. Did I do something wrong? Jennifer asked one Thursday night while I was helping her with homework. No, sweetheart. Remember what we talked about? Sometimes grown-ups make choices that hurt people they love. Grandma made some choices that hurt me very badly, so I can't have her in our lives right now. But she didn't hurt me. The simple logic of a 9-year-old's perspective nearly undid me. How do you explain that sometimes protecting yourself means protecting your child too, even when they don't understand why? 3 months after Jeffrey moved out, I enrolled in night classes at the community college. Business administration with a focus on healthcare management. I'd always been smart with numbers, and I was tired of being financially dependent on anyone ever again. Jennifer did her homework at the kitchen table while I studied for my accounting exam. Both of us bent over our books in comfortable silence. "Mom, can I ask you something?" she said one evening. "Always. Are you happier now? Without Daddy and Grandma?" I set down my pencil and really considered the question. Was I happier? I was definitely lonelier sometimes. The apartment was smaller than our house and money was tighter. I worked more hours at the dental office and still had to study late into the night. But I wasn't walking on eggshells anymore. I wasn't questioning my own perceptions or making excuses for other people's behavior. I wasn't lying to myself about being loved by people who were actually using me. "I'm sadder about some things," I told her honestly. "But I'm also more myself than I've been in a long time. Does that make sense?" She nodded solemnly. "Like when I stopped being friends with Emma because she was mean to other kids. I missed her sometimes, but I felt better about who I was. The wisdom of my daughter never ceased to amaze me." Exactly like that. That night, after Jennifer went to bed, I sat on our little balcony with a cup of tea and looked out at the lights of the city. For the first time since I'd discovered Jeffrey's betrayal, I felt genuinely optimistic about the future. Not because everything was perfect, but because everything was real. 6 months later, I was sitting in my business law class when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Laura, this is Jeffrey. Jennifer told me about your promotion at work. I'm proud of you. Can we talk?" I stared at the message for a moment, then deleted it without responding. The old me would have agonized over that text for hours, wondering if I should reply, second-guessing my decision to cut contact. The new me simply focused back on the professor's lecture about contract negotiations. The promotion Jeffrey had mentioned was real. Dr. Morrison had offered me the office manager position at the dental practice, recognizing the organizational skills I'd developed through my night classes and my natural ability to handle difficult situations. The raise meant Jennifer and I could finally move into a house again. Nothing fancy, but a real home with a yard and space to breathe. "Mom, I got picked for the advanced math group," Jennifer announced when I picked her up from school that afternoon. Her face was radiant with pride, and I felt that familiar surge of fierce protectiveness mixed with overwhelming love. "That's amazing, sweetheart. I knew all those hours we spent on homework together would pay off." During the months when I'd been gathering evidence and planning my escape from Jeffrey's lies, I'd worried constantly about how the chaos was affecting Jennifer. But watching her thrive now, seeing her confidence grow in our stable, honest environment, I realized she was stronger because of what we'd been through together, not damaged by it. That evening, while Jennifer worked on her advanced math homework at the kitchen table, I spread out house listings from our realtor. We'd been apartment hunting for a month, looking for something that felt like possibility rather than just shelter. "What about this one?" Jennifer pointed to a modest 2-story house with blue shutters and a front porch swing. "It has a big backyard for a garden." I'd never gardened before, but lately I'd been drawn to the idea of growing something from scratch. Something that would be entirely ours, nurtured by our own hands. "It's perfect. Let's go see it this weekend." The house was even better in person. The previous owners had left behind raised flower beds and a small greenhouse that needed some work but had good bones. As Jennifer explored the upstairs bedrooms, I stood in the kitchen looking out at the backyard and imagined Sunday mornings spent planting seeds and Saturday afternoons reading on that porch swing. "The master bedroom has a walk-in closet," Jennifer called from upstairs. "And there's a window seat in my room." When we put in our offer that afternoon, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Excitement about the future that wasn't tied to anyone else's approval or presence. This house would be ours because I'd earned it, saved for it, fought for it. 3 weeks later we had our answer. The offer was accepted. Moving day arrived on a crisp Saturday in October. Jennifer's friends from school came to help, turning the process into an adventure rather than a chore. Watching 9-year-olds argue about the best way to pack books while eating pizza on our new front porch, I marveled at how normal this felt. How right. My sister Katie drove down from Portland to help with the heavy lifting. She'd been my rock through the worst of the divorce proceedings, never once saying, "I told you so," even though she'd sensed something was wrong with Jeffrey long before I did. "You look different," she said as we unpacked boxes in the kitchen. "Stronger. More like yourself." I feel like myself again. Maybe for the first time in years. Katie paused in her unpacking. "I need to tell you something. Mom called me last week." I stopped arranging dishes in the cabinet. "What did she want?" "She wanted me to convince you to let her see Jennifer. She's been going to therapy apparently. Says she realizes what she did was wrong and wants to make amends." The old me might have felt guilty, might have wavered at the mention of therapy and amends. But I'd learned to trust my instincts, and every instinct I had screamed that this was just another manipulation. "What did you tell her?" "I told her that if she wanted to make amends she should start by leaving you alone. That real change means respecting your boundaries, not trying to go around them." Katie had always been the protective older sister, but hearing her defend my choices so clearly filled me with gratitude. Having family who understood, who supported my decisions without trying to manage or fix me, was its own kind of healing. That night, after everyone had gone home and Jennifer was asleep in her new room with the window seat, I sat on our front porch swing with a cup of tea and my journal. I'd started writing again during the divorce proceedings, partly to document events for legal purposes but mostly to process the tidal wave of emotions that had threatened to drown me. Now my writing was different. Instead of chronicling betrayal and pain, I was recording small victories and quiet moments of joy. Jennifer's laugh when she discovered the old apple tree in our backyard. The satisfaction of balancing my own checkbook without anyone else's input. The pride I felt when my business law professor complimented my understanding of contract disputes. I wrote about the conversation with Katie, and how it had crystallized something important for me. Empowerment wasn't just about getting away from Jeffrey and Mom. It wasn't even about the house or the promotion or the financial independence, though those things mattered. Real empowerment was the quiet certainty that I could trust my own judgment. It was the knowledge that I didn't need anyone else's permission to make decisions about my life and my daughter's life. It was the understanding that being alone wasn't the same as being lonely, and that being loved by people who lied to me wasn't the same as being truly valued. A year ago, if someone had told me I'd be sitting on my own front porch in a house I'd bought myself, watching fireflies blink in a garden I was planning to plant, I would have thought they were crazy. I'd been so convinced that my worth was tied to being a good wife, a dutiful daughter, a woman who kept everyone around her happy. Now I knew better. My worth was tied to being honest with myself and my daughter. To working hard for goals that mattered to me. To refusing to accept less than I deserved from the people in my life. Jennifer appeared in the doorway in her pajamas, hair tousled from sleep. "Mom, I had a bad dream." I set aside my journal and opened my arms. She climbed onto the swing beside me, curling into my side like she used to when she was smaller. "Want to talk about it?" "I dreamed that Daddy and Grandma came back and made us move away from our new house." I tightened my arms around her. "That's not going to happen, sweetheart. This is our home. Nobody can make us leave unless we want to. Promise." "I promise." As we swayed gently on the porch swing, Jennifer's breathing eventually deepened into sleep. I didn't carry her inside right away. Instead, I sat there holding my daughter, surrounded by the life we'd built together, feeling more powerful than I ever had when I was trying to hold together a marriage built on lies. This was what empowerment actually looked like. Not dramatic confrontations or perfect revenge, but quiet moments of absolute certainty about who you are and what you deserve. 2 years later, I was standing in the greenhouse behind our house, teaching Jennifer how to transplant tomato seedlings, when I heard a car door slam in the driveway. Through the glass panels, I saw a familiar figure walking toward our front door. My heart didn't race anymore when I saw Jeffrey. Instead, I felt the calm certainty of someone who knew exactly where she stood. "Mom, who's that?" Jennifer asked, looking up from the small pot she was carefully filling with soil. "That's your father. He's probably here for your birthday next week." I wiped my hands on my gardening apron. "Keep working on those seedlings. I'll be right back." Jeffrey looked older than his 42 years. His hair had more gray, and there were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there when we were married. He was holding an envelope and shifting nervously from foot to foot when I opened the door. Laura, you look. He paused, searching for words. You look really good. Happy. Thank you. What can I do for you, Jeffrey? I wanted to talk to you about Jennifer's birthday. And some other things. He held up the envelope. Could we sit down? This is important. I gestured to the porch chairs but remained standing myself. Old habits of self-protection. I've been in therapy for 8 months now, he began. Real therapy, not just court-mandated anger management. I'm starting to understand the damage I caused. To you, to Jennifer, to myself. I waited without responding. I'd learned that silence was often more powerful than words. I want to make things right. Financially, I mean. This envelope contains a check for the full amount I stole from Jennifer's college fund, plus interest. And I'm setting up a separate trust fund for her education that you'll control completely. He held out the envelope, but I didn't take it immediately. What's the catch, Jeffrey? No catch. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I'm not asking for it. I just want to do what's right for Jennifer. Through the greenhouse windows, I could see my daughter carefully placing seedlings in their new pots, her tongue poking out slightly in concentration the way it always did when she was focused. She was 11 now, tall for her age, with my father's thoughtful eyes and her own fierce independence. Jennifer's doing well, I said finally. She's on the honor roll, she's captain of her soccer team, and she's got friends who genuinely care about her. She doesn't need the chaos that usually follows when you try to fix things. Jeffrey winced but nodded. I understand. I'm not asking to change our custody arrangement or anything like that. I just want her to know that her father is trying to be better. Then be better. Consistently. For years. Not just when you feel guilty. I took the envelope then, not because I trusted his motives, but because Jennifer deserved that money. She deserved every opportunity one could give her. There's something else, Jeffrey said quietly. Your mother tried to contact me last month. She wanted my help convincing you to let her back into Jennifer's life. My jaw tightened. Even now, even after everything, Mom was still trying to manipulate situations from the sidelines. I told her no, Jeffrey continued quickly. I told her that I'd already done enough damage to your family and I wasn't going to help her do more. I thought you should know. For the first time in our conversation, I felt a flicker of respect for him. I appreciate that. We sat in awkward silence for a moment. Then Jennifer appeared around the corner of the house, her hands dirty from gardening, her face bright with the kind of uncomplicated joy that had taken months to return after the divorce. Hi, Daddy, she said simply, without the overwhelming excitement she used to show or the anger I'd worried might develop. Just a calm acknowledgement of his presence. Hi, sweetheart. How's the garden coming along? Good. Mom and I planted strawberries and carrots and 3 kinds of tomatoes. Want to see? Jeffrey looked at me questioningly. I nodded. 10 minutes. Then you need to wash up for dinner. As they walked toward the greenhouse together, I realized this was what healthy co-parenting might actually look like. Not the fantasy of one big happy family I'd once imagined, but clear boundaries, honest communication, and Jennifer's well-being at the center of every decision. That evening, after Jeffrey had left and Jennifer was in bed, I called Katie to tell her about the unexpected visit. Do you think he's really changed? She asked. I think he's trying to change. Whether he succeeds long-term remains to be seen. But for the first time he acknowledged that he was wrong without trying to blame me for his choices. That's progress. And how do you feel about it? I considered the question while looking out at our garden, where the seedlings we'd planted were settling into their new homes. Cautiously optimistic. Not about reconciliation or anything like that, but about the possibility that Jennifer might actually have a father who's worthy of her someday. 3 weeks later, I graduated from my business administration program. Jennifer sat in the front row wearing a dress she'd picked out herself, holding a bouquet of flowers from our garden. As I walked across the stage to receive my diploma, I thought about the woman I'd been 2 years ago. She would never have imagined this moment was possible. After the ceremony, Jennifer and I went out for ice cream to celebrate. I'm proud of you, Mom, she said, swinging her legs from the tall restaurant chair. You worked really hard. We both worked hard, I corrected. All those nights when you did your homework while I studied, you were part of this too. Are you going to get a new job now? Actually, I'm thinking about starting my own business. A consulting company to help small medical practices with their administration and billing. The idea had been growing in my mind for months, sparked by conversations with Dr. Morrison about the challenges other dentists faced in managing their offices efficiently. Jennifer's eyes lit up. Like being your own boss? Exactly like being my own boss. That night, I updated my journal with news of Jeffrey's visit and my graduation. But mostly, I wrote about the conversation with Jennifer and the way her face had glowed with pride when I mentioned starting my own business. I was raising a daughter who believed women could do anything they set their minds to, because she'd watched her mother rebuild her entire life from scratch. The last entry I made that night was simple but profound. I am no longer becoming the woman I want to be. I am that woman. As I closed the journal and prepared for bed, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. The betrayal that had nearly destroyed me had actually been the catalyst for the most authentic version of myself I'd ever been. Not despite the pain I'd endured, but because of how I'd chosen to respond to it. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new choices. But tonight I was exactly where I belonged. In a home I'd built with my own hands, raising a daughter who knew her worth, planning a future that excited rather than frightened me. This was what it looked like when a woman stopped waiting for her life to happen and started making it happen instead. This was what it meant to be the hero of your own story. The beginning was just the start. If this story of betrayal and empowerment had you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button right now. My favorite part was when Laura confronted Jeffrey with all the evidence she'd secretly gathered, watching his face drain of color. What was your favorite moment? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more inspiring stories like this. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.
I'm Amber Mitchell, 29, and I never thought I'd be banned from my own sister's wedding. Yet there I was, sipping a Mai Tai on a pristine Caribbean beach with my fiancé Ryan while my family celebrated without me. The azure waters sparkled like diamonds, a stark contrast to the storm brewing in my heart. I'd chosen paradise over drama, not knowing that in 3 days, everything would literally collapse around us. Sometimes life's biggest disasters lead to unexpected clarity. Before I dive into my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about family drama, unexpected disasters, and finding silver linings in life's storms. Growing up in Boston, my sister Cassandra and I were as close as siblings could be, despite our 2-year age difference. I idolized my big sister with her perfect grades, impeccable fashion sense, and ability to make our parents beam with pride. Diana and Brian Mitchell raised us to be strong, independent women, but it was clear from an early age that Cassandra and I were cut from different cloth. While Cassandra excelled in structured environments, organizing her colored pencils by shade and keeping her room spotless, I thrived in creative chaos. My bedroom walls were collages of magazine cutouts, sketches, and paint splatters. My parents tried to appreciate my artistic tendencies, but I often caught them exchanging worried glances when I'd announce my latest unconventional idea. "Mom, I'm going to dye my hair purple for picture day," I announced at 14, earning a sigh from my mother and a stern lecture from my father about appropriate self-expression. Cassandra, on the other hand, never rocked the boat. She followed all the right steps. Prestigious college, sensible degree in finance, corporate job at a respected firm. I chose art school, much to my parents' dismay, and pursued my passion for graphic design. By my mid-20s, I had built a successful freelance career that allowed me to work remotely, travel, and live life on my own terms. "You could have stability, Amber," my mother would often say during our weekly phone calls. "Look at your sister, health insurance, retirement plan, potential for growth." What my mother didn't understand was that I had found stability, just a different kind. My client list was impressive, my portfolio diverse, and my income sufficient for the lifestyle I desired. But in the Mitchell family hierarchy, corporate success would always outrank creative fulfillment. Everything shifted even further when I met Ryan Taylor at my college friend Jess's housewarming party 2 years ago. I noticed him immediately. Not because he was conventionally handsome, though he certainly was with his warm brown eyes and contagious smile, but because he was intensely listening to an elderly neighbor talk about beekeeping with genuine interest. "That's Ryan," Jess whispered. Software engineer by day, amateur photographer by night. Single, smart, and surprisingly not a jerk. Our connection was immediate and deep. Ryan appreciated my creative perspective, and I admired his analytical mind. He worked for a tech company, but had negotiated a flexible arrangement that allowed him to work remotely several days a week. We were kindred spirits who valued experiences over possessions, authenticity over appearances. My parents were cautiously approving of Ryan, especially when they learned about his stable career and savings account. Cassandra, however, had recently begun dating James Wilson, heir to a regional banking fortune, and suddenly Ryan's software engineer salary seemed quaint by comparison. James was everything my parents had envisioned for their daughters: wealthy, connected, ambitious. At 35, he was already on the board of his family's bank and involved in several high-profile charity organizations. On paper, he was perfect. In person, he was subtly condescending, particularly toward creative careers like mine. "Graphic design," he said with a thin smile when we first met at my parents' anniversary dinner. "How fun to play with colors all day. Is there much demand for that sort of thing?" I bristled but maintained my composure, explaining the strategic thinking and problem-solving skills required in my field. James nodded politely, clearly unconvinced, before steering the conversation toward his recent acquisition of a summer home in the Hamptons. As Cassandra and James's relationship progressed, I watched my sister transform. Her wardrobe shifted from business casual to exclusively designer labels. Her vocabulary incorporated words like summer as a verb and help as a noun. Most concerning was how she began to adopt James's dismissive attitude toward careers and lifestyles that didn't align with their elite worldview. "Maybe it's time you found something more substantial," Cassandra suggested during a rare sister lunch, eyeing my casual attire with disapproval. "James knows someone at a marketing firm that's hiring. Real work, real office, real benefits." "I have real work," I countered, trying to mask my hurt. "And the freedom to do it from anywhere in the world." She smiled the way adults smile at children with unrealistic dreams. "Of course you do." The divide between us widened as my parents fell under James's spell. Sunday dinners became showcases for Cassandra and James's latest luxury purchase or exclusive experience, while my updates about new clients or creative projects were met with polite but disinterested nods. I tried to maintain our bond, sending Cassandra texts about inside jokes or memories from our childhood, but her responses grew increasingly delayed and detached. The sister who once stayed up all night helping me create papier-mâché planets for a school project was disappearing into James's orbit, and I didn't know how to pull her back. The engagement announcement came via group text, a photo of Cassandra's hand sporting a diamond the size of a quail egg, accompanied by the caption, "She said yes. Wedding planning begins now." My parents immediately called me, breathless with excitement about joining the Wilson family and the society doors this would open. Despite our growing differences, I was genuinely happy for my sister. When she called to ask me to be her maid of honor, I accepted without hesitation, hoping this shared experience might bridge the gap between us. "Just one thing," Cassandra added after I enthusiastically agreed. "James thinks your hair color might clash with our color scheme. Would you consider going back to your natural color for the wedding?" I ran my fingers through my rose gold locks, a subtle, sophisticated shade that had become part of my identity, and agreed to consider it. This was her special day, after all. The first bridesmaid meeting was held at an exclusive country club where James was a member. I felt immediately out of place among the other bridesmaids. James's two sisters, Catherine and Allison, and his cousins Melissa and Tiffany. All four women worked in finance or law, lived in luxury condominiums, and spoke a language of privilege that felt foreign to my ears. "Cassandra mentioned you do something with computers?" Catherine asked during appetizers. "Graphic design," I corrected with a smile. "I create visual identities for brands and businesses." "How interesting," she replied without interest, turning to discuss the merits of different honeymoon destinations with the others. As lunch progressed, Cassandra unveiled her vision for the wedding: a 3-day extravaganza at a historic estate, custom designer bridesmaids' dresses at our expense, mandatory pre-wedding spa treatments, and a bachelorette weekend in Paris. The dresses will be about $3,000 each, Cassandra mentioned casually. But they're Vera Wang, so really that's a steal. My stomach dropped. I had been saving for a new professional-grade laptop, and $3,000 for a dress I'd wear once would derail those plans completely. After the meeting, I pulled Cassandra aside to express my concerns. I'm really excited to be part of your day, but the costs are adding up quickly, I explained. The dress, the Paris trip, the spa treatments, it's a lot for me right now. Cassandra's expression hardened. It's my wedding, Amber. If you can't make it a priority, perhaps you should reconsider being in the bridal party. It's not about priorities, I insisted. It's about budget realities. Could we look at alternatives? Maybe I could find a similar dress for less. James is paying for his groomsmen's tuxedos, she countered. Maybe Ryan should step up. I was stunned by her suggestion. Ryan and I manage our finances separately. I wouldn't expect him to pay for this. Well, that's your backward arrangement, she sniffed. Don't make your financial issues my problem. I retreated, hurt but still determined to find a solution. 2 weeks later, my parents invited Ryan and me to dinner with Cassandra and James. I hoped for a relaxed evening, but should have known better when my mother texted specific dress code instructions: business casual. No jeans or unusual accessories. The dinner started pleasantly enough, with my father discussing recent market trends with James while my mother fawned over Cassandra's engagement ring for the 100th time. When the conversation turned to wedding planning, I saw my opportunity. Cassandra, I've been thinking about the bridesmaids' dresses, I ventured carefully. I found some beautiful options from a sustainable designer that look very similar to the Vera Wang you like, but they're more within my budget. The table fell silent. James put down his fork with deliberate slowness. I believe we've already decided on Vera Wang, he said, his tone suggesting the matter was closed. I understand that, I persisted, but I'm trying to find a compromise that works for everyone. Compromise, James repeated as if testing an unfamiliar word. Interesting concept for a wedding. Should we compromise on the venue too? Perhaps hold it at a public park with a potluck reception. My cheeks burned. That's not what I meant. What Amber is trying to say, Ryan interjected calmly, is that different bridesmaids may have different financial situations. Perhaps there's a way to respect the vision while acknowledging those differences. James turned his cold gaze to Ryan. If financial situations are so dire that a simple dress is causing distress, perhaps priorities need examination. I notice you both seem to travel quite frequently for people with limited means. We're careful with our money, I defended. We save for experiences that matter to us. And my sister's wedding doesn't matter, Cassandra demanded, eyes welling with tears. Of course it does. I'm just asking for some flexibility. You've always been like this, my mother interrupted. Always making things difficult. Why can't you just go along with what your sister wants for once in your life? The evening deteriorated from there. James suggested that if I applied myself to a real career, financial concerns wouldn't be an issue. My father nodded in agreement. Ryan defended my work while trying to keep the peace, but the damage was done. 3 days later, I received a call from Cassandra. I've been thinking, she began without preamble, and I think it would be best if you stepped down as maid of honor. Catherine will take over. Because I can't afford a $3,000 dress? I asked, fighting back tears. Because you're making my wedding about you and your issues, she replied coldly. This is supposed to be the happiest time of my life, and you're ruining it with your constant need to be different. I was speechless. After a moment, I managed to ask, am I still a bridesmaid? Her hesitation was answer enough. I think it's best if you just attend as a guest. The following week brought another blow. After another apparent discussion with James and my parents, Cassandra called to revoke even my guest status. Your attitude has been divisive, she informed me. James thinks it would be disruptive to have you there if you can't be supportive. Supportive doesn't mean bankrupt, I argued through tears. Cass, we're sisters. How can you ban me from your wedding? "You're welcome to come if you apologize to James and commit to the original plan," she offered, her voice distant. "Otherwise, we think it's best you sit this one out." My parents called that evening with an ultimatum of their own: apologize to Cassandra and James, agree to the expensive dress and all associated costs, or be excluded from the family event of the decade. For the first time in my life, I chose myself. The week after being officially uninvited from my sister's wedding was one of the darkest periods of my life. I cycled through grief, rage, disbelief, and crushing sadness. Ryan found me one evening sitting on our apartment floor, surrounded by childhood photos of Cassandra and me. "I don't understand how we got here," I whispered as he sat beside me. "We used to be so close." Ryan wrapped his arm around my shoulders. "People change, relationships evolve. But this isn't about you being difficult or unsupportive. This is about refusing to be financially irresponsible to satisfy someone else's expectations." His unwavering support was my anchor. While my family sent increasingly guilt-laden messages, Grandma Joyce may not have another opportunity to see all her grandchildren together, Ryan reminded me that boundaries were healthy and necessary. "What if I just apologize?" I asked one night, staring at the ceiling. "Say whatever they want to hear. Would that make you feel better or worse about yourself?" Ryan asked gently. The answer was clear. Capitulating might get me a wedding invitation, but the cost to my self-respect would be too high. As the sting of rejection began to dull, Ryan pointed out something I hadn't realized: the wedding date coincided with our 2-year anniversary of meeting. "Instead of watching your sister marry someone who openly disrespects you," he suggested, "what if we celebrated us instead?" The idea took root. If I couldn't be at the wedding, perhaps I could be somewhere wonderful instead. That night, we began researching destinations within our budget. Europe was too expensive on short notice, as was Asia. But the Caribbean, with its end-of-season deals, looked promising. "St. Lucia," Ryan announced after an evening of research. I found an amazing package deal. 5 nights at a beachfront resort, meals included, for less than what that bridesmaid dress would have cost. For the first time in weeks, excitement bubbled up inside me. "Really? Show me." The photos were breathtaking: crystal clear waters, lush mountains, vibrant culture. As we scrolled through images of the resort, I felt a weight lifting. This wasn't just an alternative to the wedding, it was an opportunity to heal and reconnect with what mattered. "Let's do it," I decided. "Let's choose joy." We booked the trip that night, and I experienced an immediate sense of liberation. Instead of dreading the wedding date, I now had something wonderful to anticipate. Before finalizing our plans, I made one last attempt at reconciliation. I sent Cassandra a text: "I love you and want to be part of your special day. While I can't afford everything you've planned for the bridal party, I'd still love to attend as a guest and celebrate with you." This doesn't have to be all or nothing. Days passed with no response. Meanwhile, my mother called repeatedly, her messages growing increasingly dramatic. "You're breaking your sister's heart," she claimed. "James says stress isn't good for Cassandra during planning. Is that what you want? To make your sister ill before her wedding?" When I shared these messages with Ryan's parents during Sunday dinner at their modest but warm home in the suburbs, Linda and Michael Taylor exchanged concerned glances. "That doesn't sound healthy, Amber," Linda said gently. "Family should lift you up, not tear you down." "You're always welcome here," Michael added, passing me more lasagna. "Sometimes the family we choose is more supportive than the family we're born into." Their acceptance and understanding brought tears to my eyes. This was how family should behave: loving each other through differences, not demanding conformity. As the wedding date approached, I focused on preparing for our Caribbean getaway. I bought a new swimsuit, ordered reef-safe sunscreen, and downloaded books about St. Lucia's history and culture. With each preparation, the heavy disappointment of missing the wedding transformed into anticipation for our adventure. The night before our departure, while Ryan was packing, I received a group text from my mother. It contained photos from the wedding rehearsal dinner, my parents, extended family, Cassandra looking radiant, and James looking smugly triumphant. The caption read, missing only one person to make our family complete. I stared at the screen, feeling the familiar ache of exclusion, when Ryan gently took the phone from my hands. "Tomorrow," he said, kissing my forehead, "we'll be on a beach thousands of miles away from all this drama. Let's start our vacation now by putting the phones away." He was right. I turned my phone off, zipped up my suitcase, and chose to look forward rather than back. The moment we stepped off the plane in St. Lucia, the humid, fragrant air enveloped us like a warm embrace. Palm trees swayed against a backdrop of impossibly blue sky, and the legendary Piton Mountains loomed majestically in the distance. After the tense weeks leading up to our trip, the island felt like a haven of peace. "It smells like flowers and sea salt," I observed, already feeling the knots in my shoulders beginning to loosen. Our resort exceeded the expectations set by the online photos. Our room featured a private balcony overlooking the Caribbean Sea, with transparent turquoise waters extending to the horizon. The king-sized bed was adorned with hibiscus flowers, and a complimentary bottle of local rum sat on the coffee table with a welcome note. To new beginnings, Ryan toasted after pouring us each a small glass of the amber liquid. To choosing our own path, I added, clinking my glass against his. That first afternoon, we did nothing but lounge by the infinity pool, occasionally cooling off in the water and sipping tropical cocktails delivered by attentive staff. For the first time in months, I wasn't thinking about Cassandra or James or disappointing my parents. I was simply present, soaking in vitamin D and gratitude. "You look different already," Ryan observed as we prepared for dinner. "More relaxed. Your smile is reaching your eyes again." I caught my reflection in the mirror and realized he was right. The furrow between my brows had smoothed, and my movements were less tense. "I feel lighter," I admitted. "Like I've put down a heavy backpack I didn't know I was carrying." At dinner, we were seated at a table overlooking the beach, tiki torches illuminating the sand and waves lapping gently at the shore. A couple about our age was seated nearby, and they smiled warmly as our eyes met. "First time in St. Lucia?" the woman asked. "Yes," Ryan replied. "We're celebrating our anniversary." "Us too," she exclaimed. "I'm Natalie, and this is my husband, Marcus." 3 years for us. "Amber and Ryan," I introduced. 2 years since we met, though not married yet. Conversation flowed easily, and we discovered that Natalie was a marine biologist and Marcus an architect, both creative professionals who understood the balance between passion and practicality that Ryan and I valued. When they invited us to join them for a snorkeling excursion the following day, we happily accepted. The next morning brought adventures I'd only dreamed of. Beneath the surface of that clear blue water, an entire universe revealed itself, coral formations in fantastical shapes, tropical fish in every color imaginable, even a sea turtle that glided past with ancient grace. Natalie pointed out species and shared fascinating facts about the reef ecosystem, her enthusiasm contagious. After snorkeling, the 4 of us explored a local market, where I purchased handmade earrings crafted from local seeds, and Ryan bought a bottle of hot sauce that the vendor warned was not for the faint of heart. We sampled street food, Johnny cakes filled with spiced fish, fresh mango slices sprinkled with lime and salt, and drank coconut water straight from the source. That evening, Ryan surprised me with a private dinner on the beach. Under a canopy of stars, with sand between our toes and the gentle rhythm of waves as our soundtrack, we talked about everything and nothing. "Do you think we're making a mistake?" I asked after a second glass of wine loosened my tongue. "Choosing to be here instead of fighting harder to be at the wedding?" Ryan considered the question thoughtfully. "I think we're choosing self-respect over self-sacrifice," he finally answered. "There's a difference between compromise and capitulation. Your sister and your parents weren't asking you to meet them halfway. They were demanding total surrender to their vision, regardless of the cost to you." "But family is supposed to be forever," I countered, voicing the doubt that had lingered despite my apparent resolve. "Family should be forever," Ryan agreed. "But that doesn't mean accepting mistreatment. Real family relationships have room for individuality, disagreement, and mutual respect." As our conversation deepened, we naturally turned to our own future plans. Under that star-filled Caribbean sky, we discussed what our wedding might look like someday, something intimate and meaningful, focused on celebration rather than spectacle. No $3,000 bridesmaids' dresses, I promised with a smile. And no excluding people because they don't fit some arbitrary mold, Ryan added. Later that night, in our room, I made the mistake of checking Instagram. My feed was flooded with photos from Cassandra's rehearsal dinner, family members I loved dressed in their finest, raising glasses to the happy couple. The hashtag Wilson wedding was trending among my relatives, with captions about perfect unions and meant-to-be matches. A hollow feeling opened in my chest as I scrolled through the images. Despite the rational part of my brain knowing I'd made the right decision, seeing visual evidence of being the only one missing sent a wave of sadness through me. Ryan found me on the balcony, tears streaming down my face as I clutched my phone. "Oh, Amber," he sighed, sitting beside me and pulling me into his arms. "I shouldn't have looked," I sniffled. "I was having such a wonderful time, and then I had to go and ruin it." "You didn't ruin anything," he assured me. It's natural to feel sad about missing important family moments, even when you know you're making the right choice for yourself. We sat in silence for a while, watching the moon cast a silver pathway across the dark water. "I have a proposal," Ryan finally said. "Let's go completely phone-free for the rest of the trip. No social media, no emails, no texts. Just us, this beautiful island, and the present moment." The suggestion was both terrifying and liberating. What if there's an emergency? The resort has our information. If something truly urgent happens, we can be reached. But otherwise, let's give ourselves permission to fully disconnect. After a moment's consideration, I nodded. "Let's do it." We powered down our phones and locked them in the room safe, along with our laptops and tablets. The immediate sense of freedom was intoxicating. The next 3 days were among the most present and connected of my life. Without the constant ping of notifications or the temptation to document every moment for social media, we experienced St. Lucia with all our senses fully engaged. We hiked through rainforests to hidden waterfalls, learned to make chocolate from cacao beans at a historic plantation, and floated in the warm sea as the sun set in a blaze of orange and pink. We made friends with other travelers and locals alike. Joining a family's beach barbecue, learning traditional fishing techniques from an elderly man who'd been casting nets in these waters for 70 years, dancing to live music at a small village festival where we were the only tourists. Most precious were the uninterrupted conversations with Ryan. Without screens between us, we rediscovered the art of undivided attention. We talked about childhood memories, professional aspirations, philosophical questions, and silly hypotheticals. We dreamed aloud about future adventures and the home we might create together. I felt myself healing from the family rejection that had dominated my thoughts for months. The perspective gained from distance, both physical and digital, allowed me to see that my worth wasn't determined by my sister's approval or my parents' understanding. I was building a life aligned with my values, alongside someone who supported my authentic self. On our 5th morning in paradise, I woke feeling truly at peace for the first time since the wedding drama began. The Caribbean sunrise painted our room in golden light, and I stretched contentedly, looking forward to another day of exploration and connection. I had no way of knowing that within hours, our idyllic retreat would transform into a nightmare beyond imagination. The first hint that something was wrong came at breakfast. The normally cheerful staff seemed tense, speaking in hushed tones and frequently checking their phones. The sky, while still blue, had a strange quality to it, an unnatural stillness that made the hairs on my arms stand up. "Something feels off," I mentioned to Ryan as we finished our tropical fruit platters. Before he could respond, the resort manager approached our table with a tight smile. "Good morning. I hate to interrupt, but we've just received a weather alert. Hurricane Eliza has changed course overnight and is now heading directly towards St. Lucia." My stomach dropped. "Hurricane?" There wasn't any hurricane warning when we checked the forecast yesterday. It was tracking toward Barbados, but it shifted unexpectedly and has intensified, he explained, handing us a printed weather bulletin. The island government is implementing evacuation protocols for coastal areas, including our resort. The bulletin contained satellite images showing an ominous spiral cloud formation approaching the Caribbean islands. Projected to make landfall within 24 hours, Hurricane Eliza had strengthened to a Category 4 storm with sustained winds of 140 miles per hour. What does this mean for guests? Ryan asked, his software engineer's mind already analyzing the problem logically. We're arranging transportation to designated storm shelters inland, the manager explained. Please return to your rooms immediately, pack essential items in a single small bag, and gather in the lobby within 1 hour. Leave everything else secured in your room. As he moved to the next table to deliver the same news, Ryan and I exchanged worried glances. We should get our phones from the safe, I said, already standing up. Back in our room, chaos had replaced the previous serenity. Outside our window, resort staff were frantically securing outdoor furniture and boarding up windows. The previously gentle sea had turned choppy, white-capped waves crashing aggressively against the shore. We powered up our phones to find dozens of missed calls and messages from my parents, from Cassandra, from Ryan's family, all expressing concern about the approaching hurricane that had been international news for the past day while we remained blissfully unaware. No time to respond now, Ryan said, stuffing essential items into our day packs. We'll call everyone once we're safely at the shelter. I grabbed our passports, medications, wallets, a change of clothes, and our phones. As an afterthought, I added a photo of Ryan and me that sat on the nightstand, a small reminder of happiness amid the developing crisis. In the lobby, the atmosphere was tense but orderly. Resort staff efficiently organized guests into groups based on transportation availability. Families with young children and elderly guests were prioritized for the first departures. The main shelter is at a school in the Central Highlands, a staff member explained as we boarded a shuttle bus. It's built to withstand hurricane-force winds and is well above potential flood levels. The drive inland was sobering. Locals were boarding up homes and businesses, securing boats, and packing vehicles with belongings. Many waved at our bus of tourists with expressions of genuine concern, a touching reminder of the renowned St. Lucian hospitality even in crisis. As we climbed higher into the hills, I spotted Natalie and Marcus in the seat ahead of us. Did you get any warning? I asked, leaning forward. Natalie shook her head. We were on a diving excursion when the boat captain got the alert and brought us back immediately. Barely had time to grab our passports. The shelter, a solidly constructed concrete school building, was already filling with people when we arrived. Local emergency management officials directed the flow of evacuees, assigning spaces in classrooms and hallways. Ryan and I secured a spot along a wall in what appeared to be a science classroom, spreading the emergency blankets provided by shelter staff. It's going to be a long night, Ryan observed, looking around at the hundreds of people settling in for the duration of the storm. As afternoon turned to evening, the weather deteriorated rapidly. Rain began as a gentle patter, but soon transformed into sheets of water pounding against the windows. Wind howled around the building's corners with increasing ferocity, producing an eerie, almost human wailing sound. By 8 p.m., the power went out. Emergency generators kicked in, providing minimal lighting in main areas while most spaces, including our classroom, were illuminated only by flashlights and battery-powered lanterns. A local family with 3 young children sat up next to us, the mother, Grace, trying to maintain calm for her kids while clearly terrified herself. When the youngest child, a boy about 4 years old, began crying in fear at a particularly loud thunder crash, I found myself offering comfort. "Would you like to see a trick?" I asked him, pulling out my phone and turning on the flashlight. Using my hands, I created shadow puppets on the wall, a dog, a rabbit, a bird in flight. His tears subsided as he watched in fascination. "Show me how," he requested, and soon I was teaching all 3 children the art of shadow puppetry, providing a small distraction from the intensifying storm. Around midnight, Hurricane Eliza made direct landfall. Nothing in my life had prepared me for the sheer violence of nature unleashed. The building, designed to withstand such forces, nevertheless shuddered and groaned under the assault. Windows vibrated with such intensity that I feared they would shatter despite their hurricane shutters and reinforcement tape. The noise was the most terrifying aspect, a constant roar punctuated by crashes as debris struck the building. Each impact elicited gasps and cries from shelter occupants. Children whimpered, adults prayed, and emergency workers moved among us offering reassurance that the structure would hold. Ryan remained my rock throughout the night. While I alternated between anxiety and attempts to comfort others, he maintained a steady calm, his arm around my shoulders providing silent strength. "The ice should pass over us soon," he mentioned after consulting with a local emergency worker. "There will be a period of calm before the second half of the storm hits." Sure enough, around 2 a.m., the howling winds and pounding rain suddenly ceased, creating an eerie silence that felt almost as unnatural as the storm itself. Officials warned everyone to remain inside despite the temptation to venture out during this deceptive calm. "This isn't over," the shelter coordinator announced through a megaphone. "We're in the eye of the hurricane. The second half will arrive soon and can be even more dangerous than the first." He was right. Within 40 minutes, the storm returned with renewed fury, attacking from the opposite direction. This time, I was prepared for the onslaught, but that made it no less frightening. Dawn broke with the storm still raging, though somewhat diminished in intensity. The generator had failed hours earlier, leaving us in darkness except for emergency lights. Cell service had disappeared completely, cutting us off from the outside world and any news about the extent of the damage. By mid-morning, the hurricane had finally passed, leaving an uncanny quiet in its wake. Emergency officials began organizing assessment teams to evaluate conditions outside, while instructing evacuees to remain in place until the all-clear was given. When we were finally permitted to step outside around noon, the scene that greeted us was one of stunning devastation. The lush, tropical landscape had been transformed, trees stripped bare or uprooted entirely, roads blocked by debris, buildings with roofs torn away or walls collapsed. A local official with a battery-powered radio delivered the news. Hurricane Eliza had been the strongest storm to hit St. Lucia in over 50 years. Coastal areas had suffered catastrophic damage, including the resort where we had been staying. "The east wing of the Ocean View Resort has collapsed entirely," he announced, reading from an emergency bulletin. Thankfully, the successful evacuation ensured no casualties among guests or staff. Ryan and I exchanged stunned glances. The East Wing. That was our room. If we hadn't evacuated, I whispered, unable to complete the thought. Ryan pulled me close, both of us processing the narrowly avoided tragedy. Had we been in our room when the hurricane hit, we might not have survived. "Any news about when communications might be restored?" someone asked. "Cell towers are down across most of the island," the official replied. Emergency services are working to establish satellite communication, but it could be days before regular service returns. That meant days before we could contact our families, who must be frantic with worry. The thought of my parents and Cassandra believing we might be injured or worse sent a wave of distress through me. Despite our recent conflicts, I didn't want them to suffer that kind of fear. As we stood contemplating our situation, a local emergency worker approached with a clipboard. "We're arranging transportation back to unaffected areas for tourists. However, the airport has sustained damage and will be closed for at least 3 days." "What about the resorts?" another tourist asked. "Most coastal properties have significant damage," he explained grimly. "Local authorities are working to secure temporary accommodations inland for displaced tourists and residents." Reality was setting in. We were stranded on an island devastated by a natural disaster, unable to communicate with loved ones, with no immediate way home. The vacation that was meant to help me escape family drama had now transformed into a crisis that would put everything into perspective. The days following Hurricane Eliza became a masterclass in perspective. Our priorities shifted instantaneously from tourist indulgences to basic survival needs: clean water, food, shelter, and safety. The infrastructure damage was extensive: power lines down across the island, water systems compromised, roads blocked by debris or washed away entirely. Local authorities organized emergency response admirably, considering the circumstances. Tourists and locals alike were directed to functional inland hotels and guesthouses, though accommodations were barebones and often overcrowded. Ryan and I shared a small room with Natalie, Marcus, and an elderly couple from Canada, grateful for walls and a roof when so many had lost their homes. Water was rationed, with each person receiving 2 liters per day for drinking. Cold showers were permitted every other day, lasting no more than 2 minutes. Meals consisted primarily of rice, beans, and whatever local produce had survived the storm. Bananas that had been harvested before the hurricane and root vegetables dug from the ground afterward. Yet amid these hardships, I witnessed something extraordinary: the best of humanity emerging from crisis. Tourists with medical training volunteered at makeshift clinics. Those with language skills served as translators. Everyone contributed however they could. "They need help distributing supplies in the village down the road," Ryan mentioned on our second morning after the storm. I told them we'd volunteer. Soon we found ourselves loading cases of bottled water and boxes of non-perishable food onto the back of a pickup truck, then helping distribute these essential items to local families. The gratitude in their eyes, despite having lost nearly everything, humbled me to my core. Natalie and Marcus joined us, and together we formed an efficient team. Marcus's strength and height made him ideal for loading heavy items, while Natalie's organizational skills helped create a fair distribution system. Ryan's problem-solving abilities and my communication skills rounded out our impromptu humanitarian squad. Working alongside St. Lucians, I learned the true meaning of resilience. One elderly woman, whose roof had been torn completely from her home, insisted on giving me a ripe mango she had salvaged from her damaged tree. "We share what we have," she said simply when I protested. "Today I have mango." The gesture brought tears to my eyes. Here was someone who had lost nearly everything yet still practiced generosity without hesitation. My family conflict over a $3,000 dress suddenly seemed not just petty, but obscenely privileged. On the 3rd day, limited cell service was restored in our area. The scramble to contact loved ones was immediate and emotional, with dozens of people crowded around the few functioning outlets to charge phones. When I finally got through to my parents, my mother answered with a sob. "Amber." "Oh, thank God. We've been out of our minds with worry." "We're safe," I assured her, my own voice choked with emotion. The resort was badly damaged, but we were evacuated before the worst hit. "Your sister postponed the wedding," she informed me, to my shock. "When we heard about the hurricane, she couldn't go through with it while not knowing if you were alive or dead." The news stunned me into momentary silence. Cassandra had postponed her meticulously planned, extremely expensive wedding out of concern for me. "She's been beside herself," my mother continued. "We all have. James has been using his connections to try to get information from the State Department about American citizens in St. Lucia." Even James had been concerned? The revelation forced me to reconsider my perceptions. "Can I talk to Cassandra?" I asked. A moment later, my sister's voice came through, thick with tears. "Amber? Are you really okay?" "I'm fine," I assured her. "Uncomfortable and dirty, but safe. Ryan's here with me. We've been helping with relief efforts." "I was so scared," she admitted. "When we saw the news about the resort collapsing and we couldn't reach you, I realized how stupid I've been. A wedding isn't worth losing my sister." The conversation that followed was raw and honest in a way we hadn't been with each other in years. Cassandra acknowledged how James's influence had changed her priorities and perspectives, often not for the better. I confessed my resentment of her seemingly perfect life and admitted I could have been more understanding about her wedding vision. "I still want you there," she said. As my maid of honor, if you're willing. We've rescheduled for next month. I'd be honored, I replied sincerely. Though I can't promise to be back by then. The airport is closed indefinitely, and there's talk of evacuation ships, but nothing concrete yet. Whatever it takes, Cassandra insisted. Just come home safely. When James got on the phone briefly, his tone lacked its usual condescension. Glad you're safe, he said stiffly. Let us know if there's anything you need. I have some contacts who might be able to help with evacuation. Though his manner remained somewhat formal, the offer seemed genuine. I thanked him politely before ending the call to allow others access to the precious working phone. As I related the conversation to Ryan afterward, he listened thoughtfully. Near-death experiences have a way of clarifying what's truly important, he observed. For your family, the possibility of losing you put everything else in perspective. I just hope the feeling lasts once the crisis passes, I replied. The next 4 days continued in a similar pattern, volunteering during daylight hours, sharing limited resources, and forming bonds with fellow survivors that felt deeper than friendships developed over years in normal circumstances. I noticed subtle but significant changes in myself as well. Material concerns that once seemed important, designer clothes, the latest tech gadgets, social media validation, now felt trivially unimportant. Instead, I found profound satisfaction in helping others, in problem-solving with limited resources, in human connection unmediated by screens or status. Ryan and I had several deep conversations during those long nights by lantern light. One in particular stands out in my memory. What will you take from this experience? He asked as we sat on the balcony of our temporary lodging, looking out at a sky brilliant with stars now that most artificial light on the island was extinguished. I considered the question carefully. Perspective, I finally answered. And gratitude. We spend so much energy on things that don't matter, status, appearances, keeping up with expectations. When survival is at stake, all that falls away. And what about your family? He pressed gently. I think I understand them better now, I admitted. They're flawed, sometimes infuriating, occasionally hurtful, but they love me. And when they thought they might lose me, everything else became secondary. Will you do anything differently when we get home? Set clearer boundaries, I said without hesitation. But with compassion rather than resentment. I can love them without needing their approval for every choice I make. Ryan smiled, taking my hand. That sounds like growth to me. On our 7th day post-hurricane, news arrived that several cruise ships had been diverted to St. Lucia to evacuate tourists and vulnerable locals. The process would be based on need, with medical cases, families with young children, and elderly individuals prioritized. You should go, Natalie urged when we discussed options. Your family is worried sick, and they've already rescheduled the wedding for you. What about you two? I asked. Marcus shook his head. We've decided to stay another week if they'll let us. As marine biologists, Natalie can help assess reef damage, and I've been working with local builders on structural reinforcements. We feel useful here. Their selflessness inspired me, but I also recognized that returning home would bring closure for my worried family. After discussing it with Ryan, we added our names to the evacuation list. Securing passage wasn't simple. With thousands trying to leave and limited space available, the process was understandably chaotic. We spent an entire day at the makeshift evacuation center, waiting as officials processed paperwork and assigned priorities. I'm looking for Amber Mitchell and Ryan Taylor, a Port Authority worker called late in the afternoon. We have space on tomorrow morning's departure if you can be ready at 5 a.m. Relief flooded through me. We'll be ready, I promised. That night, we said emotional goodbyes to the people who had become like family during this ordeal, Natalie and Marcus, the local volunteers we'd worked alongside, even the elderly couple who had shared our crowded room. This experience changes you, the Canadian woman said, hugging me tightly. Don't let that wisdom slip away when you return to normal life. I promised her I wouldn't, and I meant it with every fiber of my being. Our last night in St. Lucia was spent packing our meager remaining possessions and reflecting on the profound journey we'd experienced, not the vacation we'd planned, but perhaps the transformation we needed. "Whatever happens with your sister and the wedding," Ryan said as we prepared for sleep, "remember how you feel right now. This clarity is the gift hidden within the disaster." As I drifted off to sleep, I realized that Hurricane Eliza hadn't just collapsed buildings. It had collapsed the walls I'd built around my heart and the artificial constructs that had been dividing my family. From that destruction, something stronger and more authentic could now be built. The voyage home was long and uncomfortable, a crowded cruise ship repurposed for evacuation, followed by a series of flights on standby status, but eventually, we touched down at Boston Logan International Airport. Exhausted, unwashed, and wearing the same clothes we'd had on for days, we emerged into the terminal to find both our families waiting, holding handmade welcome signs and fighting back tears. My mother reached me first, pulling me into an embrace so tight it nearly cut off my breath. "My baby," she sobbed against my hair. "Thank God you're safe." My father, never an emotional man, made no effort to hide the tears streaming down his face as he wrapped his arms around both my mother and me. Behind them stood Cassandra, uncharacteristically subdued in jeans and a simple sweater, her usually perfect hair pulled back in a ponytail, her face free of makeup and marked with signs of sleepless nights. When we finally separated from our group hug, she stepped forward hesitantly. "Amber," she began, but words failed her. Instead, she threw her arms around me, her body shaking with silent sobs. "It's okay," I whispered, holding her tightly. "I'm okay." Ryan was experiencing a similar emotional reunion with his parents. Through my tears, I saw Linda Taylor cradling her son's face in her hands, examining him as if to assure herself he was truly unharmed, while Michael repeatedly patted Ryan's shoulder, his expression a mixture of relief and pride. The drive to my parents' house was filled with questions about our experience. How bad was the hurricane? Were we ever in danger? How had we managed afterward? We shared abbreviated versions of our story, too exhausted to provide full details, but wanting to satisfy their concern. "We saw the footage of your resort," my father said soberly. "The entire east wing collapsed into the sea. If you'd been in your room..." "But we weren't," Ryan interjected gently. "We were safely evacuated thanks to the resort staff's quick action." My mother shuddered. "When we couldn't reach you and then saw that on the news. I've never been so terrified in my life." The wedding seemed so trivial suddenly, Cassandra added quietly from the back seat where she sat beside me. "James wanted to proceed, said people had traveled for it, arrangements were made, but I couldn't. Not when we didn't know if you were." She trailed off, unable to voice the possibility that had clearly haunted my family for days. "We've rescheduled for next month," my mother explained. Most vendors were understanding given the circumstances. "And James?" I asked, curious about my future brother-in-law's reaction to this expensive disruption. Cassandra's expression tightened slightly. "He was disappointed. But he came around eventually." Something in her tone suggested there was more to that story, but now wasn't the time to press for details. At my parents' house, Linda and Michael joined us for an impromptu welcome-home dinner. My mother had prepared all my childhood favorites: lasagna, garlic bread, Caesar salad, and though I was still adjusting to regular meals after days of rationing, I appreciated the loving gesture. During a moment when Ryan was showing his father photos we'd managed to save on our phones, Cassandra pulled me aside into the kitchen. "I need to tell you something," she said, her voice low and serious. "The hurricane and almost losing you, it made me see things differently. Including James." My eyebrows rose in surprise. "What do you mean?" She twisted her engagement ring nervously. "When I wanted to postpone the wedding, his first concern was the inconvenience and lost deposits. Not you, not what I was going through. Then I started noticing other things, how he talks about people who aren't as wealthy, how he dismissed the suffering in St. Lucia as just something that happens on those islands. Cass," I began carefully, "are you having doubts about marrying him?" Her eyes welled with tears. "Is it terrible that it took almost losing my sister to see who he really is?" I pulled her into another hug. "It's not terrible. Sometimes we need a shock to see what's been in front of us all along." I don't know what to do, she whispered. Everything's arranged. People are expecting it. Mom and Dad adore him. What does your heart tell you? I asked. Before she could answer, my mother entered the kitchen. There you two are. We're about to serve dessert. The conversation remained unfinished, but a new understanding had formed between us. The sister who had once prioritized appearances and expectations was beginning to question the path she'd chosen. The following weeks were a period of adjustment and healing. Ryan and I moved temporarily into my apartment since his had been sublet during our planned vacation. We attended therapy sessions to process the trauma of the hurricane, gradually recovering from the experience while integrating its lessons into our lives. My relationship with my family entered a new phase as well. During a particularly meaningful family dinner 2 weeks after our return, my father raised his glass in a toast. To perspectives changed, he said solemnly. Sometimes it takes almost losing someone to realize what truly matters. My mother nodded, tears in her eyes. I'm sorry we got so caught up in wedding details that we lost sight of what's important, that our daughters are happy and healthy, regardless of their choices. And I'm sorry I tried to force you into a mold that doesn't fit, Cassandra added, looking directly at me. Your different path isn't wrong, it's just different. And it's perfectly you. Their words were healing balm to wounds I'd carried for years. I haven't always made it easy, I acknowledged. Sometimes I've rejected your advice just to prove I could do things my own way, even when your wisdom might have helped me. Perhaps we all need to do better at listening to each other, my father suggested. Really listening, not just waiting for our turn to speak. That conversation marked the beginning of a new era in our family dynamics. We started having regular Sunday dinners where everyone's voice was valued. My parents began asking genuine questions about my graphic design work, showing interest in my creative process rather than concern about my financial stability. I, in turn, made more effort to understand their perspectives rather than immediately assuming they were judging my choices. The most significant change, however, was in Cassandra. 3 weeks after our return, she asked me to meet her for coffee at a small cafe we'd frequented as teenagers. I ended things with James, she announced without preamble as I slid into the booth across from her. Though I'd suspected this might be coming, the finality of her statement surprised me. How did he take it? About as well as you'd expect, she said with a wry smile. First, he tried to dismiss my concerns, then he attempted to negotiate as if my feelings were a business deal, and finally he accused me of having a trauma-induced mental break and suggested I seek psychiatric help. Wow, I breathed. And the wedding? Cancelled. Not postponed, cancelled. She took a deep breath. It's been messy. His family is furious about the embarrassment. Our parents are confused but supportive, and I've lost some friends who think I'm crazy to walk away from James Wilson. But how do you feel? I asked, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. For the first time in years, her smile reached her eyes, a genuine expression I'd almost forgotten. Lighter. Like I can breathe again. I didn't realize how much I'd been compromising who I am to fit his expectations until the hurricane put everything in perspective. That's what matters then, I assured her. I've been thinking about what happens next, she continued. I've been at the same firm for 7 years, always following the expected path. But maybe it's time for something different. Like what? Remember how I always wanted to work in art restoration? Before Dad convinced me finance was more practical? I nodded, surprised she'd revived this long-abandoned dream. There's a certificate program at the museum. It would mean a pay cut and starting over, but... She shrugged, a hint of excitement in her eyes. You should do it, I encouraged. Life's too short not to pursue what brings you joy. That's what I realized watching you all these years, she admitted. Despite our parents' worries, despite my judgments, you've built a life that authentically reflects who you are. I envied that freedom while simultaneously criticizing it. Her honesty touched me deeply. It's never too late to change course, Cass. Over the following months, our family continued to heal and evolve. Cassandra enrolled in her art restoration program, moved to a smaller apartment, and gradually separated herself from the social circle she'd shared with James. Our parents, after initial concern about her throwing away her finance career, came to support her decision when they saw how much happier she'd become. As for Ryan and me, the experience strengthened our bond in ways I couldn't have imagined. 6 months after the hurricane, during a sunset walk along the Boston Harbor, he stopped and turned to me. "The hurricane taught me that life can change in an instant," he said, reaching into his pocket. "And that I don't want to waste a single day not being fully committed to you." The ring he offered was simple and elegant, a sapphire surrounded by tiny diamonds that caught the fading light. "I chose sapphire because it reminded me of the Caribbean waters," he explained. "A beautiful memory extracted from a difficult experience." Through happy tears, I accepted both the ring and the future it represented. When we began planning our wedding, I knew exactly who to ask as my maid of honor. Cassandra accepted with tears in her eyes, promising a drama-free experience focused on celebration rather than spectacle. "I was thinking," she suggested during a planning lunch, "what if we held it at that community center where you volunteer? It's beautiful with all the murals you designed, and the rental fee would support their programs." Her suggestion, so different from her previous wedding vision, confirmed how much she'd grown. Our wedding plans progressed with the same values that now guided our lives: authenticity over appearance, meaning over materialism, inclusion over exclusivity. When my mother occasionally slipped into old patterns, suggesting more elaborate decorations or questioning our choice to serve locally sourced comfort food, I gently reminded her of our priorities, and she quickly realigned. As I look back now, I can see how being banned from Cassandra's wedding set in motion a series of events that ultimately strengthened our family in ways we couldn't have imagined. The hurricane that destroyed buildings also swept away pretenses, leaving only what was solid and true. Sometimes the structures we build, whether physical buildings or emotional walls, need to collapse before we can construct something stronger and more authentic in their place. For my family, it took a natural disaster to break through years of accumulated expectations and judgments, creating space for genuine understanding and acceptance. The journey wasn't easy, but the destination was worth every difficult step. From being banned from a wedding to building more meaningful connections, from surviving a hurricane to creating a life of purpose and authenticity. These experiences taught me that sometimes our greatest challenges lead to our most important transformations. What about you? Has a difficult experience ever unexpectedly changed your life for the better? Share your story in the comments below. And if you found something valuable in mine, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that even life storms can clear the path for something beautiful. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and remember, sometimes when things collapse, they make way for something stronger to be built in their place.